thank you for joining. I am Marion Guénard from ICLEI World Secretariat, and I'll be moderating this webinar. And I'm also joined by Rebecca Wissinghager, who manages the Alliance and will be moderating the discussion part of the webinar. So as most of you already know, as part of the 2020 support cycle, the Urban Transition Alliance is supporting the city of Turku in embedding social equity criteria into its circular economy roadmap. And in today's challenge introduction webinar, we look at how this can look like in practice for 3 of the sectors that Turku has prioritized for the further development of the roadmap. And that is food, water, and building and construction. And as you can see, we have a busy agenda. We'll start with a presentation from Lisa Latti, who is the project manager of Circular Turku. She will present the project and its linkages with social equity. And then we'll have presentations from Ava Richardson from Baltimore, Kevin Mendel from Buffalo, both from the US, and Agnieszka Czajak from Ghent in Belgium on how their respective city has incorporated a social equity lens to food, water, and construction planning. And we are keeping some time at the end of the webinar for a free discussion around Turku's key question around embedding social equity into circular economy planning. And before I give the floor to Lisa for an introduction presentation, I will just give you a quick overview of who is actually in the virtual room today and will hopefully be participating to the discussion. So we have Lisa from Turku, and also coming from Turku, the surrounding region of Finland. We have Miriam from Wallonia, the Service Center for Sustainable Development and Energy of Southwest Finland. Essi from Finland Futures Research Center, who has been really involved in stakeholders mapping for this project. Riikka Lepänen from the Finnish Innovation Fund Sitra, who is funding the Circular Turku project. Anna Heri from the Lahti University of Technology in Finland, Tiina Karpinen from the Finnish Environment Institute. Thank you so much for joining. And we have also a few cities joining us today. We have Jonathan Gordon from Newark, Dirk and Michael from Dortmund, Verena from Bonn, Sebastian from Essen, coming a bit later, Agnieszka from Ghent, and from the other side of the Atlantic, for them it's the morning. We have Ava from Baltimore, Kelly and Kevin from Buffalo, and I think that's it. I have to go through the changing attendees list, yeah. So without further ado, maybe I will give the floor to Lisa so she can introduce the Circular Turku project and the linkages with social equity.
Hello, I am Liisa Lahti. I'm the project manager of the Circular Turku project. Please, if you don't hear me, let me know, because I don't have a proper mic, so I'm just using the overall computer's mic, so just at any point.
We can hear you very clearly, Lisa.
Oh, that is great. Okay, so how can we plan the Circular Turku process with and for the local residents? And basically, within these 10-15 minutes, I'm going to tell you guys what is Circular Turku actually, and our approach to social inclusion. And then I have combined key questions and call for help for you guys. So basically, to start with Turku's climate targets, we want to be carbon neutral by 2029. And what that means is that at least 80% of our greenhouse gas emissions have to be gone by that time, and the rest should be then compensated. Actually, can I use that? Yes. So basically, I can use this. Great. And at this point, we want by next year to have 50% of our carbon emissions reduced, and actually we're going to reach that already this year, most likely. So we have been doing a good job here at this area. And from 2030, we want to be climate positive. So basically we try to reduce as much as possible and then compensate the rest. So this Circular Turku project is pretty much a way towards resource-wise society. So we really look this as a tool, as a map. How can we reach this society that uses resources wisely and there's no waste, for instance, at all? So this our roadmap process of the region of Turku. We want it to be ready by next spring 2021 for the municipal elections to help everybody, the politicians and everybody, to really boost and make clear, okay, what is this circular economy and how can we reach, or what can we reach with it? And then to give you guys some background, actually here already 2017 and 2016 and 17 regional roadmap was constructed. So here at this wider region, Turku is here, around here, this little circle. So that was done already some years ago. So now we want to combine the city-wide roadmap, and at the same time we have a national process going on by the government, and that will be ready by 2020. So we have really strong possibility to align this, the region-wide process that has been done, and the national-wide process, and the city-wide process. And strong collaboration is actually the key point of our work. So basically, we want to work directly together with people to enable powerful and efficient work, so that we don't have any obstacles of, okay, who is managing what process. No, we work together. We ask the people to join us. It's like really informal way to work. And during the inception phase, that was this fall and finished now this winter, there were a lot of co-creation workshops organized, and Essi and Miriam were involved, and Riikka in those ones. I hope you guys can give your input at some point for those, for the presentation. And then during that work, Essi was actually producing this survey that there are 700 circular economy actors here within the Turku region. So that really tells us that we have a lot of people already involved with the circular economy, and the quality is actually really good as well. So that's a core point of their business or actions. And 270 of those 700 are businesses. And here we also have strong political will, as you saw that we have the aim to be carbon neutral 2029, and that is unanimous that the city council say that we want to be carbon neutral. So basically, a lot is happening, many actors, and working directly with each other. So then when we move towards the social inclusion, so actually it says in our climate plan that everybody here has the right to take part in building a carbon neutral Turku. That is the right of every citizen here. And how do we incorporate this in the roadmap process? So basically, the roadmap is we're gonna come up with concrete actions and concrete projects within 5 priority teams. So we are gonna do the planning together with the different actors. And my question would actually be, how do we actually involve and enable average citizen to also take part in this process somehow? So the 5 priority groups are energy, water, buildings, food, and logistics and transportation. So how do we enable? We have the specialists and so-called work life involved in the work, but how would we easily, in an easy and fun way, to also involve average citizens? That would be my question to you guys there as well. And then another big part of the work is the outreach. So basically residents engagement and business engagement. So for residents, we have planned different campaigns, different events, different kind of how we kind of make everybody that they know what is happening here in Turku region, and that they would get excited to be part of this work with us. And the same for businesses that are not directly working with us for constructing the projects. And here you can just see the 4 pillars: ambition, integration, collaboration, inclusion, that combine what we want to achieve and the feel of our work. So then to go into the actual work that has been done already here in Turku region. So 3 cases from that also relate to today's topics. So what has been done here is, like, for instance, this energy positive wastewater treatment system. So basically 14 different municipalities, they used to treat the water separately. So now they have combined their efforts. There's one wastewater treatment center which is actually energy positive. It produces 10% of the district heating of Turku. And it also creates by byproduct biogas for the transportation. So this was kind of the result of the collaboration of these 14 different municipalities. And there's this engineering solutions here combined. Another engineering solution is circular construction building sites that use local byproducts such as ash and gypsum and clay from the harbor to source building material within 50 kilometers radius from Turku. So another great innovation of industrial symbiosis and engineering way to produce circular economy solutions and better uses of materials. And then food system through public procurement. In Turku, we have managed to actually track the carbon footprint of different meals, and with that, it's easier to reduce the emissions, and also we can increase the amount of vegetarian meals, and the aim is to have actually 50% of vegetarian meals by 2029. So that is the carbon footprint calculator used in the city services, food services. So, and then the other work. This is just the work that we do with the Circular Turku, but then there's other work we do within the city itself, and then there's the other actors as well. I don't even know what so many things they do. But for instance, with the city, we have this wider collaboration, Smart and Wise, where we combine kind of human point and the smart city point together. That is a big city project. Then we have a participatory budgeting. So okay, how can, like this spring, we enable local residents, they can say, okay, I would like to have, for instance, sewing machines in the library, or I would like to have that more budget used for gardens, for instance, in my area where I live. So we have this sort of way for people to be involved. And then we have the climate team, where we have people can join, like here we have some members of the climate team. So we have these different kind of ways of reaching people. But my question really is that how do we really manage to touch the people's hearts? Like for instance, these Circular Turku success cases, they are really good examples of the engineering way of producing better material flows, for instance. But how can we now take the next step and really touch people's hearts? How can we involve people in for instance, when there's a new resident area, the design of that residence area, for instance. And I check in time. Okay. So here I have combined the key questions. So I would like us to have systemic and systematic approach. So for instance, that what the work we do as a city of Turku itself. How can we really make that also systemic so that we have involved and enabled citizens to be involved in as many processes and projects we have, so that it's holistic and then that it's systematic. All the things that we have tried already, that how can we move forward with that so that it's not just one time pilot, that okay, somebody else can use it as well, and that we actually do it. And the point would be that we should have all the different citizens groups involved somehow by someone. It doesn't have to be that we as the city produce the way of that person to be involved, but we should make sure that nobody is left out. So we should make sure that somebody is producing somehow a way for everybody to be involved. And then the tricky part, measuring. So how do we actually measure social equity, and how do we link the indicators to the concrete actions? So now when we are coming up with the bigger projects, for instance, within the energy system, how do we actually make, like when we have our ambitious targets, how can we say that, okay, this is how we measure the social inclusion, and that's actually bringing us social welfare, health, happy lives? How do we do that? And especially important with the measuring, how do we make sure that it's also about the quality, not just the quantity? So for instance, quite often we end up talking about money, even though we say that we talk about social sustainability. So for instance, that it's not just about jobs, it's about the quality of jobs that we produce, for instance, with our projects. And then that we are all in this together. As a city, as an area, we cannot leave anybody behind. We have to make sure that we have a balance of providing different ways for different citizens group that they can take part. And at the same time, we should create clarity and trust for all different actors, that okay, like, what is my role in this big equation, in this big puzzle? What is my role? And the trust that okay, I can be part and everybody else wants to be part, and that I can do my part. I don't have to worry about all the burdens of the world, but I can worry about my part and do that. And to create the will and inspiration for actually people to take part. So here's my comprehensive list of questions, and I thank you at this point. And I managed to stay in the 50-minute time as well. So I'm looking forward to hearing your proposals and ideas.
Thanks so much, Lisa, for the comprehensive overview of Circular Turku and what it means for different sectors, as well as the list of questions that we need to address during this webinar. They are not easy questions. I think probably everybody was feeling like, okay, this is a hard task. So to give us food for thought, we've invited 3 cities to describe how they've incorporated social equity within 3 sectors, 3 sectors that are a focus of Circular Turku. And I would like to start with Eva Richardson from Baltimore, to talk to us about how Baltimore designed a sustainable food environment with equity in mind. So Eva, over to you. And if you would like to start with the video, please let us know. And a quick note from me again, there was no question so far, but please feel invited to post your question also during the presentation if you would like some clarification.
All right, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Lisa, for that presentation. I think it's really inspiring what Turku and so many other cities across the world are doing to advance more sustainable kind of natural resource management systems. And so thank you. And I also want to thank Marion and Rachel for bringing Baltimore into this conversation today. And I think a lot of what Lisa talked about is kind of what we are working on in Baltimore when it comes to fostering more circular, zero waste economies, how we embed that into our planning, how we embed that into our food systems. And really at the core of that, we want to ensure we're promoting social equity in our waste management systems, social equity or equity in our food systems, because we know that the benefits for these changes, they should be shared amongst everyone in society. And so we will talk a little bit about that today. In Baltimore in 2016, that was before I joined the office, my colleague Andrade and some other folks at our office had led an effort to get a better understanding of what city residents wanted to see in terms of a more sustainable food system. And that led to the creation of the Baltimore food waste recovery strategy. And in there, we set out goals for different sectors. So across the city, in our 2019 sustainability plan, we have a goal to reduce all food waste across the city by 50%. And then for each sector, for the commercial, higher education, K through 12 and residential, we have goals set out for each of those. And so I'll talk about some of the engagement and programs that we've implemented in order to reach that goal. So first, I just kind of want to go over what some of the systemic challenges and like why food waste is an issue. So in the United States, roughly 40% of all food produced is wasted, and globally, roughly a third of all food produced is wasted. And when that food gets wasted, it's so much more than just the banana peel or the orange peel or the burger, but it's all the water and all the labor and the time and fuel that went into producing that food that also goes to waste. A lot of times when food is wasted, it does not end up, it ends up in a landfill or in some other mechanized waste management system, and that leads to a lot of emissions. When food waste sits in landfills, it emits methane gas, and so we really wanted to be critical about how we are preventing food waste in the city through different measures. And so kind of at the top of that hierarchy is really reducing food waste. And this hierarchy was created by the Institute for Local Self-Reliance. And really it focuses on kind of like that community level. So it really focuses on bringing that social equity into this conversation. So we have reducing the waste, which I think in general, in any kind of like waste reduction hierarchy, we want to see a source reduction first, but also looking at edible food rescue. So while millions and millions of tons of food go to waste every year in the US and across the world, many people are food insecure. Many people do not have enough food to eat. And a lot of times these foods are edible, they're high quality. And in no way are we saying that wasted food or food that is lower quality should go to people that are in need. That's not the point. The fact is that a lot of food that gets wasted is edible and can be served to people and is safe to eat. And we have to overcome some of the stigma around that. But then there's also the option to feed food scraps and other things to animals, which is something that we do in Baltimore, and we'll talk about that. And we have at that kind of community and that home level, we have an option to divert organic waste or organic food scraps through small scale and decentralized composting systems or community composting systems. So to really get to those large diversion goals, so to get to our 50% food waste reduction and diversion goals across the city, we need a large facility to process, a large anaerobic digester or composting facility to get to those really big numbers. But to really start educating the residents across the city, having that small scale option available is so important. So again, we look at the prevention aspect of all of this, and we are working closely with colleges and universities, as well as hospitals, to help them think about how they are preventing their food waste. And so we know in the commercial industry, there's such a huge opportunity there, because there's so much volume of food that is produced on a daily basis. We heard from a hospital recently that was throwing away roughly 150 to 200 pounds of food a day. And this is food that is created by their catering contractor. And so this is really good quality food that gets thrown away because it's hard to determine sometimes in a hospital setting or any kind of setting where you're producing large volumes. It's kind of hard to determine how much you need. And so when we found that out, we worked with the Maryland Food Bank to get that food diverted. And I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. So when we talk about food rescue, again, that is about rescuing food and diverting it from the waste stream to ensure that it feeds people, really just feeds people. Oftentimes, you know, it's framed as feeding people in need, but if we're feeding people regardless, I think that that's the real goal. We work with the Maryland Food Bank, which is a part of the Feeding America network in the United States, to leverage a Meal Connect application that they have. And so this is an electronic application that connects donors with nonprofit organizations that receive food donations, and it's all facilitated through a network of volunteers. So volunteers pick up this food, they deliver it to different nonprofits across the city, and the service is free to use for nonprofits as well as for donors, and for any volunteer that's interested, they can sign up. And so this has been a great way to really grow and expand our network when it comes to food rescue. As the COVID-19 crisis pandemic grew and we saw a lot of food businesses closing, having this connection with the food bank was really important to diverting some of the smaller scale kind of like rescued food or food donations to different nonprofit organizations across the city that didn't always provide meals. That wasn't always a service that they provided, but food insecurity increased so much across the city, from around a quarter to around a third. And so there was a rapid increase of need, and having this relationship, having this role in the city was really made a difference when it came to being part of that response. So in 2018, our Baltimore Food Policy Initiative team, they developed a series of food environment maps. And so what these maps did was look at the kind of healthy food priority areas in the city, formerly known as food deserts, basically looking at a few metrics in terms of the Healthy Food Availability Index, which was an index that was created to kind of like rate or gauge how much food is available in a particular area. They looked at residents' incomes, household vehicles, because for a lot of people, if you don't live within a certain distance of a grocery store or some kind of market that serves fresh quality foods, or that where you can buy fresh quality foods, that can be a challenge to food security or getting healthy foods that you need. And whether or not residents were within 1/4 mile of a supermarket. And so when we think of food insecurity, it's really a combination of those 4 factors that impact whether or not someone has enough food to eat on a daily basis, whether or not they have a car, whether or not there's financial hurdles, and whether or not they live in an area that provides options. This is a map of our healthy food priority areas that our BFPI team created. And the red areas are the areas where we see that there is not a lot of healthy food available. And that's why we think it's so important to really address the inequity in these systems. We understand that working on the issue of food waste, it definitely intersects with waste management systems as well as food systems. And part of our work is trying to foster a healthier food system that really considers the environmental consequences of our actions, of our consumption patterns, and by ensuring we are diverting that surplus food to people in need, we're addressing some of these issues, but we are in no way solving food insecurity by engaging in food rescue. We know that because that's a deeper, more systemic problem when it comes to food insecurity or poverty in a society. But we know that this is a way to help address some of it. For people that are interested, and I can share this link in the chat, we have a case study that features kind of like how we focus on a city-based food sourcer role to advance some of our food rescue capacity across the city. And this program grew quite a bit over the past year or so, and it continues to grow. So we're really excited to see this program continue to expand and transform as we see that need grow. And really, this is about coordination and logistics. It's about ensuring that there are relationships between potential donors in nonprofit organizations, and having that network of volunteers there to pick up and deliver. And so we're working on determining how best to facilitate some of those connections. Just also, again, reiterating how we're working with several different sectors, including the institutional sector, the very large institutions in the city, K through 12 schools. We've been working really closely with our school system to better understand what it is that they need in order to meet their food waste goals. And the school system is really great about implementing ways to reduce food. And really, their goal is not just to compost or divert the food from the waste stream, but it's to get more healthy food in children's bellies. And so, because if that food, even if it ends up in a compost bin, that means that's nutrients that the student did not eat, or that children are missing out on. And so they implement programs such as Offer versus Serve that helps children better determine kind of like what things they want to put on their plate or their lunch tray. And then shared tables. So if a child doesn't want an apple or an orange, they can put that on the shared table, and someone else can pick it up. And so obviously now that schools are closed, we're not really working on implementing these programs right now, but there's quite a lot of food waste that happens in a lot of schools, and part of that is because of some of the federal guidelines that we have that schools have to follow in terms of what has to be served to students. And so this is a great way to really address some of that waste that gets generated. And then last, we have the food scrap collection that we're working on across the city. We are launching a network of 5 community composting sites, as I saw before, in that food recovery, in the hierarchy, community composting or at home and local composting or food scrap collection are really important options for people to learn and better appreciate kind of consumption patterns and what kind of waste and things that it is that they are generating. And we collect food scraps at our largest farmers market in the city and work with farmers to feed it to their hogs. So this is a really exciting program that we are thinking about how we can grow, because this really brings the food system completely circular. People come to the farmers market, they drop off their food scraps, and they can buy pork or other products from the farmer that is using those food scraps to feed her hogs. And we know there's more options to do this across the city and across the region, and we're looking hard for some of those. And last, I just want to share this video with folks. I think Marion or Rachel is actually going to show the video, but yeah, we just want to share a video. It's about 5 minutes. I don't know how much time I have left, but feel free to cut it off whenever you have to. This is a video about some of our food scrap collection going on in the city. So if you want to go ahead and play that, please. Thank you.
How do I work towards a future where people can grow really healthful food in ways that's beneficial to the environment, but also benefit from the production of that food and use it to feed themselves and to feed their families and to feed their communities? Food is this kind of core tenet of everybody's lives, and really so much of what we interact with revolves around food. Food is actually not only related to health, but it's also one of the kind of biggest environmental drivers and one of the biggest things that kind of shapes our environment. Food waste is actually the largest material in our landfills in the US. Preventing that food waste from happening in the first place is actually where we will get the most environmental benefit. Baltimore has taken an amazing approach, which is, engage community partners, engage residents, and engage them at different points throughout their day.
And there used to be buildings here before this became White Lock Community Farm.
My name is Marvin Hayes. I'm the Youth Program Manager for the Baltimore Compost Collective. We are a youth-led food scrap collection service. We have 77 customers in Federal Hill, Riverside, Locust Point. Curtis Bay, Brooklyn. NRDC and the Rockefeller Foundation have been able to support us to make us a model for composting for Baltimore City, for other community gardens to learn that they can divert their food scraps and turn it into compost soil enhancers. We had 3 incinerators. Baltimore City has one of the highest asthma rates in the country. So we have a great opportunity to educate the affected people in this community. So I train youth on the art of small-scale composting, and they run this food scrap collection service, bring the food scraps back to Filbert Street Garden, process it, and make it into black gold. Filbert Street Garden, which I like to call the Wakanda of South Baltimore. We don't make vibranium, but we do make leaf gold, compost, black gold.
In our 2019 sustainability plan, the city committed to reducing food waste by 50% by 2030. And in our recovery strategy, we actually committed to reducing residential waste by 80% in the next 20 years. When we began our partnership with NRDC, it really catalyzed the efforts that we were doing regarding food waste across the city. Everything from the funding to the subject matter expertise that they were providing really ensured that we had the resources to implement these programs effectively. We collect food scraps at the farmers markets on Saturdays and Sundays. The farmers fill up their trucks with the food scraps and take it back to their farm. So we don't have to pay a hauler. It's just a way to be creative, and it kind of really represents the ingenuity of Baltimore. We are also working with NRDC to launch a network of community composting sites across the city. These sites will be critical and key to ensuring that residents have access.
White Lock Community Farm is a farm that allows the community access. You'll notice throughout the day that you'll see folks that'll come by and stop by and help out. We used to have the old-fashioned chicken wire kind of compost system, and it was here on the main lot. With the funding, we were allowed to purchase the kits and the materials in order to build a 3-bin compost system. We're all one group as the Farm Alliance of Baltimore, and we all have urban farms, and we work together.
Yeah, this is a tough neighborhood. It has the lowest rates of employment, highest number of vacant homes. These lots were all houses that had gotten raised in the 90s. Both of these open fields were just dumps. It was all types of trash, tires, bathtubs, everything. And so when the farm was here, all of this got cleaned up.
If you're turning a vacant lot into green space, growing food or places for composting, and you're removing litter and dumping from your community, you're getting that engagement from the community and the interest in participating.
Baltimore showed just amazing leadership. We have a network of cities around the US that are working on food waste, that are motivated to do this work. You're not alone. There are so many other people that are excited about this, and you can count on them.
Learn so you don't have to burn. Starve the incinerator, feed the soil, feed the community.
So yeah,
Great.
I just want to say again, once again, thank you all so much for having us. And I will be remiss if I did not mention the robust relationship that we have had with the Natural Resources Defense Council, which is a national environmental nonprofit. As you saw in the video, they provided so much support, both financial in terms of subject matter expertise to the project, and have been a really critical part in us moving forward this issue. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Ava, and also for the compelling video. And sorry that some of you could not see it. Apparently, there were a couple of people who pointed you could either not see or hear, but we'll share it afterwards. And with an eye on the time, I would like to give the floor now to Kevin Mendel from Buffalo to look at how the city planned for sustainable water infrastructure that support equity.
Thank you so much. I'm hoping to share my screen here.
Yeah, we can see your screen perfectly.
Oh, okay, great. I'll just come from here. Thank you so much to include me in this discussion. It was really great to see that video in particular. I thought that was very inspirational. So I was asked to put together 5 slides in 10 minutes to talk about equity in our stormwater work, and it is such a large topic that I really had to kind of be selective with what I'm choosing to present here. It's such a deep topic. But I thought I'd give some background on our citywide analysis and then zoom into a specific project to see how green stormwater infrastructure can take on equity lens and focus on multiple scales. So to give some background, our city has experienced racial inequality historically, and it has even seen some redlining as recently as only a few years ago. This is where communities of color are unable to access capital based on discriminatory policies from lending institutions. Inequality is a systemic issue. So first, I think it's important to simply provide the data. When we provide and communicate the data, we are essentially saying we acknowledge that this is a problem, and we are being transparent in recognizing that inequalities are systemic throughout society, and institutions such as local government are influential actors who have contributed to some of the existing conditions in the past. We recognize this, and we want to use our influence and power as local government to address it. This is not something to sugarcoat or put a positive spin on with rhetoric. We need to just say, here it is. This is the reality of our current situation. Things are not good for many in our city, and race in particular is a factor in determining health and quality of life outcomes. Your geographic area in the city determines your health and quality of life. In some areas of the city, the life expectancy is 20 years below the life expectancy of other areas located only a mile or two away. So when it comes to green stormwater infrastructure planning, in some ways we want to distribute and spread out our investments. This conceptualizes equity in terms of an equal distribution, where every neighborhood receives the same dollar value investment in infrastructure improvements. There are advantages to this in that it's equal and it gives the appearance of being just and fair, but the problem is that not everywhere in the city is starting from an equal standing, and some areas have been historically underserved or may have vulnerable communities that would have greater benefit. And so we look to see where the greatest magnitude of benefit is. In 2019, we wanted to understand where we might have the greatest impact with our stormwater investments. And so this is a top-down kind of technocratic analysis that you're seeing on this map. The analysis itself was led and guided by a technical advisory committee of local community group stakeholders and other local government agencies, as well as NGO nonprofit groups who specialize in urban sustainability. The equity index looked at 17 factors, both socioeconomic and built environment, to see where GI might have the most benefit. The factors were chosen based on a literature review of academic studies, as well as what data we could obtain. Again, the idea was to try to identify where GI could have the greatest impact. Overall, everybody benefits from clean water. So in some ways, no matter where we implement green infrastructure projects, it will be good for all. However, realizing the very real benefits to the immediate surrounding community, the hyper local context, we can target areas where the positive benefit will have the most impact and be very strategic in our implementation. Planting 100 trees in a neighborhood that already has a lot of trees will not have the same magnitude impact as planting 100 trees in a neighborhood with no trees. We have to find the precise points to intervene with natural systems. We find the places where the order of magnitude will be the greatest. We need to be thoughtful with where we want to implement, and our high-level geographic analysis that we saw on the previous slide is completely absent of local knowledge. So to do this in a thoughtful, more targeted way, we need to do on-the-ground outreach and communicate with those who live and work there. And this is kind of what our equity work looks like. Removing ourselves and our preconceived notions, and in some ways that remote analysis is very different and detached from the place itself. And so on every project, we need to physically walk around the area and get a sense of the spirit of the place or the genus loci. In addition to being physically present in the space, we have to get to the people who live and work around there to really understand how to work. We can't just helicopter in, make some quick judgments and assessments, and kind of design a project as an outsider. We need the privileged knowledge of the community itself. And so I wanted to give an example of what this might look like on a project level scale. And so this is the Niagara Street project. You can see in the bottom left corner on their map of our equity index. It's the kind of location in red, anticipated to have a high impact. Again, as part of all of our GERC, we want to understand the kind of hyper-local conditions and context. So this means getting out of the office, meeting people on the street, and we're looking to do work in this neighborhood and want to know how we should do it in a way that will most benefit you. So what is the identity of the area? What do we want to change about the physical conditions of the place? How can our work and our investment in stormwater management best serve you and your community? We are civil servants. We have to serve the interests of the people. It's our job. Clean water benefits everybody, no matter where we work or how we work, but this is a way to take equity further and embed diverse perspectives and include multiple voices. The Niagara Street project was a collaboration between the City of Buffalo Department of Public Works and the Buffalo Sewer Authority and local community groups. And we wanted to use our green infrastructure as a catalyst for a large street redesign. The Department of Public Works was looking to repave the street, and the need for stormwater management from the Sewer Authority enabled the project to take on a larger scale than would have been on its own. So we were very fortunate to receive grants from multiple funding sources, including the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as the New York State Department of State. For the Niagara Street project, the community's voices were heard through a survey, as well as a series of workshops. This particular neighborhood has several different ethnic groups, as well as new Americans and some households that have limited English fluency. To make sure we got everybody's input, we translated our outreach materials into surveys in 7 different languages, to make sure that everyone who wanted to participate could participate and really help co-design this space and the streetscape, as well as their surrounding environment. We went door to door with tablets. We interviewed residents on street corners. We wanted to listen first and see what we can use our investment to further their vision and their ambition for their neighborhood. Equity in green infrastructure planning really can't just look to where. It also really needs to look at, how we're going to do this work. The design that was finalized for this project included the feedback that was directly from those we surveyed and did the participatory workshops with. So people had asked for a safer pedestrian crossing, and so we put in curb bump outs at the intersections. People commented that traffic from automobiles was too fast and needed to be slowed down. So we reduced the number of travel lanes to slow down that traffic. Street lighting was noted to be old and was using inefficient high-intensity discharge lamps, so we installed new high-efficiency LED street lights. The community wanted a sense of identity that spoke to their cultural heritage, and so we renamed a segment of the street as Avenida San Juan to celebrate the Puerto Rican heritage of many residents who lived along this corridor in the surrounding neighborhood. A local artist created public art to help celebrate this culture. People asked for better bike infrastructure, and so we created the first dedicated cycle track in the city, which is pretty much a protected bike lane separated from the roadway by a raised median. And of course, I was most happy to hear the vast majority of people wanted more plants and trees, and so our green infrastructure used as many plantings as we could. For all of our projects, we want to include a diverse and local workforce. Our mayor has had very strong leadership on equity and has established a first source hiring policy where all public work projects have a goal to achieve at least 25% of the people working on the project be City of Buffalo residents. The mayor also established women and minority business participation goals, where each project has a goal to include at least 30% of the contract dollar value go to a women or minority owned business entities. For green infrastructure, we find that jobs that make up this workforce are paid a higher average median wage than the city overall. And so GI, green infrastructure in Buffalo, is seen as a promising career opportunity with relatively low barriers to entry for some positions, particularly surrounding maintenance and construction. We've recently begun green infrastructure training and certification to look to provide training opportunities to local community groups, small businesses, and schools. So by providing a training certification, we are giving people a way to earn a decent living wage doing meaningful work in their community. We also have involved with an educational programming around green infrastructure and career opportunities and created what's known as a Waterworks summer youth program that involve children in grades 4 through 8 to learn about sustainable infrastructure in the water sector in particular. Reaching kids when they are young opens them up to potential career opportunities, and we hope to foster, greater interest in this field overall. We also have a partnership with the University at Buffalo through the Renew Institute to work with academic fellows on sustainability research and help support our efforts further. These type of educational programs and collaborations with local academic institutions really allows us to grow both the overall knowledge base of the community, but it also fosters this sustainable culture in our region overall. So that takes me into my slides. But I just want to share with participants that equity is a very deep concept with a lot of theory behind it. And having on the ground application of equity principles to the deployment of green infrastructure is also a very rich topic. And condensing these into 5 slides in just a few minutes really doesn't do it justice. And so I'm happy to talk further with anybody about not just our work in Buffalo, but also hear what you're doing and around these larger issues overall.
Thanks so much, Kevin. Yeah, within the Alliance, we also constantly reminded that social equity is so multidimensional and complex. So thank you for bringing different dimensions to our eyes on how Buffalo has been working to make sure green infrastructure best serve the community and all vulnerable groups, especially. I guess we'll come back to question afterwards. And to proceed with our last presentation, this time from Ghent in Belgium, I would give the floor to Agnieszka Sajak to look at the topic of buildings and construction and how Ghent has fostered a collaborative approach on neighborhood redevelopment.
Correct?
Yeah, we can see and hear you.
You can see and hear me. Okay, that's great. So I'm going to share with you some experiences on our approach to neighborhood redevelopment applied in the old dockyards project in Ghent. Ghent is a city of around 320,000 inhabitants, and 70,000 of them are students. We have really here an innovative and sustainable future vision. The city has a strong tradition of strategic urban planning. And the last years, we took large steps towards, for example, circular economy. There was a successful introduction of a new mobility plan, more space for bikes, more space for recreation, and so on. We have a lot of different regeneration projects who really bring together companies, institutions, businesses, governments, and citizens to try to reinforce the attractiveness of the city. But the project of the old dockyards is in fact one of them, of those so many different small projects. It is a former harbor area which we are going to try to develop. You can see on the picture here on. And the project is supervised by the city and also by the Autonomous Municipal Ghent Development Authority. We will try with this project to really radically change the looks and the function of this entire city area. We will build here around 1,200 housing units who will be constructed to fulfill the promise and to deal with housing shortage, which we have at that moment in Ghent. There will be modern houses who will offer something to everybody's taste. So juniors, seniors, couples, large families, everyone will certainly find a place to live. There will be also enough room for offices, shops, recreation, and public services around the space. There is also an extension of the public transport network, bicycle and pedestrian bridges, which you can see here on, and really a high quality of public areas will give the surrounding quarters and the entire city a strong impetus for renewal. The project was excuse me, I'm trying to move to the next one, but it's like not going. Yeah, okay. There it is. So The project as a master planning was born already in 2004 by a successful vision of OMA, so Office of Metropolitan Architecture of Rem Koolhaas. But before we were able to do a realization, we really spent several years to plant this idea of this new project to put it on, into the mental map of all our citizens. We did it by establishing a stakeholder committee. You can see here some pictures of the meetings which we held. It was represented by neighbors, some organizations and stakeholders, around 40 people chosen by draw, sitting several times a year during around 10 years together to talk about the project, to explain the project, to explain why. And we really tried to do it on the best ways we could. This was a quite complex process. Not everyone was convinced about the way how we wanted to transform the old dockyards into the living area. And it was quite a challenge to find common interest. But if they all trust us to go on the boat, we believe that it was a small success after all. Another innovative idea was to inform and to talk with everyone about the project by organizing a dialogue cafe. It is looking quite easy. We just put some people together around the table and we talk about some urgent subjects, like, for example, do we need more green area? What about mobility? What about maybe having more houses? What kind of typology of the house you would like to have? But before we started to organize those cafes, we first took our round table with all of our governance, so all the politicians together around the table, and I believe it was really not possible to keep them all sitting at the table. So we learned very quickly that this kind of discussions can only be successful if you really prepare it very well from the beginning. So everyone can and would like to contribute to a cozy neighborhood, but even when we had those meetings, do we understand the same things while saying them? We had to deal often with fostering imaginations. Everyone was meaning something else. We tried to put some methods to solve those problems. One of the methods we used was to make instant drawings of all the ideas. So during the time everyone was talking about this, you could also see what's about and discuss direct. We also convinced the city to organize a dialogue cafe for more than 100 inhabitants of Ghent, who discussed pros and cons on the project of 3 different teams of developers and architects during the time of preparing public-private partnership process. It was really an open people referendum, and it was the first time something like this was held in Belgium. It was quite unusual. Even afterwards, I received a lot of telephones from people from other cities to ask how it was going well and if it's something that can be also done for other projects. It was a quite happy experience. Between making all those different plans and ideas and effective realization of the projects, years are going by. Realized very soon, already in 2006, that the temporary use of grounds and buildings can give the project another dimension. As you can see here on the picture, we had and we still have several different projects of temporary use. It took us 3-4 years to convince the policy about the positive effects of temporary use. And after a slow start, we were receiving one proposition after the other one to use the grounds. So it was also interesting for us to have different temporary use projects because of the size of the area. As you can see, it's quite large, more than 2 kilometers long. And by this, we have several things happening on different places. And how it was looking and how it is looking like, it's something like that. We offered all kinds of happenings for the neighborhood and for Ghent's inhabitants, like a huge drive-in cinema, concerts, exhibitions, theater, sports, a city farm, flea markets, for example, here, and so on. So it was very quick that the old dockyards has already become an integral part of the city. At the same time, it offers enormous opportunities in terms of communication. It was really a pleasant way for us to inform the visitors about our future plans. We did some exhibitions, or we showed some pictures about this. And it was also a huge urban laboratory for us. During several years, we were observing what kind of activities from bottom up are organized there and why they are successful. And for example, we found out that the temporary city beach, which you can see here, was really just loved by everyone. So we looked around about the project, and we were lucky to find a place in the north part of the project. And just in the beginning of lockdown, we finished the realization of a huge beach, as you can see here on the picture. So it is a nice example that temporary use can also give you a lot of ideas and can have a definitive destination in your project. Another smaller example is, for example, urban gardening, something what's also very popular in Ghent, as we could see in some previous presentations. And it's nice to see that even private developers are using and introducing urban gardening in the project. So a lot of new inhabitants will have their kitchen garden forever. So today I can say without a doubt that finding this right balance between communication and participation and establishing temporary use were the right keys for this collaborative approach. But I wonder if you're also ever thinking about turning smart cities, what's normally now happening on, into emotional cities. And I would like to challenge you all to dare to leave a white space, you know, without a decision, without a destination, without a vision, just an open space and an open mind for an experiment and unknown. We tried this a little bit with this project. It's a quite huge open area, neglected area, and it was very easy to get there and just create something. So you can see here some nice examples. People get inspired, we get inspired by people as well. There's really some nice things were happening on, and it's nice to see that they can give an extra boost to the area. So just try it, you will really get surprised what you can achieve. And I would like to finish with some conclusions. I think that Ghent shows another kind of approach of city development. It's not only based on real estate development, but based on the needs. And we are really trying to create it in co-creation with all inhabitants and users of Ghent. As you all know, very complicated and important facet is also time. A city is not a static fact. The city evolves together with its community and its people. And urban planning has to foresee the challenges of the future. We plan for the present, but far more for the future generations. So every day, the city, the politicians, the planners, developers, the architects, we are all striving for a perfect equilibrium between urban planning, economic reality, and livable environment. So this is how we are working on this project of the old dockyards, and we are trying to create a small part of Ghent livable for everyone. Voila, so this is my presentation. I really try to keep this very short, and thank you very much for, and you can always contact us for more information.
Sorry, I was muted. Beginner mistake happened to everybody. So I was saying thank you so much, Agnieszka, for sharing Ghent's experience in redeveloping the old dockyard and using this as an opportunity to favor participatory approaches and start from a white page. I really like the idea. So to come back to our original guiding question from Turku, summarized on this slide, I think we've had a lot of inputs that contributed to answering them, but we also want to now open the floor to a more interactive discussion. So feel free to answer your question in the question box, or to raise your hand if you would like to directly provide input or ask a follow-up question. In any case, as a reminder, the main topics we're looking at right now is how can we creatively involve, and twice creatively, different groups in circular economy planning. I think we had examples from Buffalo and from Ghent, but others would I definitely welcome. How can we use circular economy measures, so looking at resource planning, to foster a community feeling, a sense of belonging to the same city? How can we monitor progress, and what indicators can be used to ensure social equity? Again, we had interesting inputs from Baltimore and Buffalo on this. And finally, what are good examples of how we can collaborate among city departments to link circular economy measures to social equity? How can we do this all together, as Lisa was saying? So the floor is yours. And I would maybe hand over to Rebecca to manage the question.
Sure, thanks, Marion. This is Rebecca, also from ICLEI, and I'm happy to kind of give the first question to Michael Leichner from the city of Dortmund. He has raised his hands, I think, about an hour ago, so I think he must have a burning question by now. So, Michael, I'm going to unmute you, and now you have the chance to pose your question.
Thank you, Rebecca. I try to remember what was my question, but it was about the food matters. And I saw only on one slide in the car a lot of food packed in aluminium paper. That was my question. Why so many aluminium paper to pack food? Is it sustainable? That's just a question to Baltimore, but sorry. Okay.
Thank you, Michael. Maybe Ava would like to respond to that, to maybe just address the question if also the wrapping of food or the means of transportation has been considered in the sustainable food strategy and the food recovery program that she has introduced to us.
Yeah, it was about this, yes. Yeah, that was the question, because it was wrapped in aluminium paper, and I guess it's not really sustainable, you know. If you on the one hand save I don't know, carbon emission by being sustainable in protecting food waste, and on the other hand you wrap it in aluminium paper in such a big scale, you know.
Yeah, no, thank you so much. That's such a great question. So, and I would say that the issue of food waste is a really complicated problem. There are no simple and easy solutions. And as far as I know at this point, I think globally and in the United States, we have not figured it out. And so I'll lead by saying that. But when it comes to the use of aluminum in food wrapping, we know that metals such as aluminum, they actually are they're very durable, and they can be used over and over again in perpetuity, not losing too much of their quality or their value. So in that sense, it can be beneficial if the aluminum is actually recycled. But we know that our recycling rate in Baltimore is relatively low. So I'm not 100% sure that all the aluminum used in food packaging is actually recycled. So we have talked a lot about food packaging because we know that's such a huge part of our waste stream as well. and how we circularize different aspects of our waste stream in terms of food packaging, transitioning more to sustainable food packaging options. A lot of that is beyond our control as the city, because then it gets to extended manufacturer responsibilities. From what I understand, a lot of European countries and cities have thought more about this and have more progressive laws related to like how what essentially is a waste product that's made in the private sector, but the responsibility for managing it and recirculating it or managing the waste of that, taking kind of like the linear life cycles of that product, it is funded through public dollars. And so that's something that we definitely think about a lot. At this point, you know, just thinking how we really get that food product to be better used. So getting it to a composting facility, getting it to feed people, getting it to a point where it's feeding animals. We want to get to the point where we're thinking more about how we recirculate the metals and the cardboard, and we have more sustainable packaging that is either compostable or biodegradable. But we at this point, I think as the city and in the United States, we don't have great policy infrastructure to support kind of like that large scale systemic change outside of recycling the aluminum. So I hope that addresses your question. And I agree, we do need to do better in that regard across the city and across the country. But again, these are wicked problems that I think if you look at different cities across the globe, that everyone has created a different solution. And there may be some creative ways to address it that we just haven't thought of yet. But if you have ideas for it, definitely open to hear it, because we are learning more and more from other cities across the world. And we know that there's so much more out there that we can try and kind of like incubate and pilot and experiment with here. So thank you for the question.
Thank you so much, Ava. And I think we have a second question, and actually also a third, also following up on the topic of food. So first, Agnieszka, who has just presented from Ghent, would like to give an intervention or an idea about saving food. So yeah, please go ahead. I'm just going to unmute you now.
Okay, thank you very much. I just wanted to share an idea which we have here in Ghent. We have here something what's called in English, too good to go. So restaurants, everyone who's producing food can put it on the internet in a kind of app structure, what they have over, and the people can come and get it. And the idea is that don't need to wrap the food in any kind of aluminium foil or something like this, because everyone who's coming to pick this up is bringing something with. So you take your own stuff from home, whatever you have, and then you go to a restaurant or to the hotel or to the shop, and you just take the food what's over. You have to reserve it by internet, so you are sure what you reserve will stay and will wait for you. But it's very well working, and it's really we managed in the city really to try to low down the waste of the food the last years. This is the one idea which we have, and the other idea, it's called in Dutch it's called resto restjes, and when I translate it in English, it's like the restaurant rests, and each time, I suppose that this is more known in other cities as well, so each time when you go to the restaurant, you are also obliged to you are free to take your food which you are not able to eat everything with you at home. I suppose that this was already well already introduced in America, but here in Europe it's rather new for us. Okay, so that was
perfect. Thank you so much for sharing. Yeah, I think maybe some of this, as Ava also has said, has been slowed a bit by the current COVID pandemic, but I think it's really great ideas. Yeah, actually, there is a third question that was initially posed by Sebastian on the topic of food. This goes to both Turku and Baltimore. If the possibility of urban farming to become a local food source has been considered, and I think some of that was already answered in the video we've seen from Baltimore. And for those who haven't been able to see, I just also shared the link. So maybe I would want to give the floor to Turku and yeah, just ask Lisa if there was anything on this front on urban farming and yeah, food security that Turku has considered already.
Yeah, thank you. This is Lisa. And actually, we have really good, maybe Miriam also could give us her input, or Riikka from Wallonia, because we do actually have already, like the city of Turku has like this places where you can do your own gardening. And also we have this like throughout the city, these small boxes that we can, like anybody can like kind of reserve one and do whatever with the box as well. And I do know that Wallonia has also, like for instance, for kindergartens, they have this like education of like with food and producing food. But I do think that we lack like a comprehensive like a strategy how to do it, because I really like, for instance, the like kind of the composting. Like we have like, we don't have really like all our bio waste is separated and it goes to like a central composting place, but could we also kind of bring somewhere back kind of as to kind of show, okay, how do we produce food? So this is composting. This is like okay, you can, anybody could go in the middle of the city to do gardening and like kind of to do it together as was done in Baltimore. So that would be like super, I think, exciting for us to kind of combine those like separate things into one bigger plan and strategy. But I don't know, maybe Miriam or Riikka wants to give their ideas to this as well. If they can.
Yeah, if there is no one else, I would like to share the idea of all the dockyards. What we are doing there with rest of the food and rest of the garden, we are producing their biogas. So there is, yeah, I don't have the time. Normally, I'm doing the presentation of the all dockyards like about 1 hour, so I can share all those different ideas. But there is also the whole circular economy structure, who has now already built it. So more than 400 families, everything what they produce of the food and of the rest is going to a huge biogas tank, and by this we are producing electricity and warmness in the return. So this is also another idea about you can compost, but you can also use it to produce energy.
Thank you so much both for the reply. Actually, I would now like to shift from the topic of food to the next topic of water. And I think one question that we also initially heard from Lisa and that has come up a lot through Kevin's presentation is how to identify and reach communities in need. Actually, how to involve the citizens. And I think what we've seen from the Niagara Street Green Corridor and other programs was really exciting. And there was actually a follow-up question from Kelly, also from Buffalo, to Kevin, about the hiring goals for public works project from the mayor of Buffalo to kind of, yeah, maybe Kevin, you could elaborate a bit more on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. So certainly, the more the better. These are really minimum goals. So for source hiring, we have minimum goals of 30%. So that's 30% of the hours worked on the project are going to City of Buffalo residents. And then for women and minority-owned businesses, the goals are set at 25% of the dollar value of the total contract go to minority-owned businesses, and for women-owned businesses, it's 5%. So again, these are minimums. Certainly, the hope is that we're surpassing them, but again, it just helps set us up as a baseline, so to speak, to make sure that we're approaching these projects and including everybody and trying to support our community as best we can.
Thank you so much, Kevin. Yes, so we have another question from Michael from the city of Dortmund. So I'm going to unmute you now, Michael. And depending on the length, we maybe have time for one more question. So please be encouraged to raise your hand if you also have something to ask. So Michael, the floor is yours.
Yeah, do you understand me?
Yes, we hear you.
Yeah, thank you, Rebecca. On my book, I had written a question for the presentation of Turku, but is it too early now, or can I give it to Lisa Lati?
Sure, please go ahead.
Okay, there was one slide where you said that you take the clay from the harbor of Turku for something. I don't know for which use. I don't remember for which use. But my question is, the clay from a harbor, isn't it very contaminated with chemical things and like this?
Lisa, would you like to answer to that?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I don't know the correct answer for that one. I assume that it is not too polluted because the harbor is actually like the sea is not that polluted, but I'm sure they do have like a procedure to also like kind of like I'm an engineer myself, so now in my head there goes like 1,000 different procedures that you can like clean, like you can basically wash the clay. So I'm sure they do that for the processing.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, but I haven't not visited that factory myself, so I cannot tell what exactly they do, but for sure they wash it somehow.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions. So just to the audience, it's the last chance now to raise your hand if you also have a question. If not, I will just give back to Marion. Also, with an eye to the time, we're almost done. So yeah, maybe Marion, I give you the opportunity to wrap up.
Great, thanks Rebecca, and thanks to everybody for submitting your question, and especially to our presenters today for submitting inputs. I think we had a lot of inputs that addressed the guiding question, so that would give you a lot of food for will give us a lot of food for thoughts for further work with Turku, and we'll definitely be in touch for follow-up question and conversation. So yeah, thank you again, and thank you also to Shnesana, who from ICLEI side dealt with all the technical side of the webinar. So thanks a lot. And maybe for the final words, I would like to hand it over to Lisa if you have some final remarks you'd like to share.
Yeah, thank you, Marion, and thank you everybody so much for the inspiration. And one thing that really came to my mind here is that it's really about like we have the examples like or things that we can do to really kind of bring them together and draw the picture and like tell the story of the whole cycle. That's also the kind of the circular economy that we tell the whole story, how we actually moved, like for instance one area of the city, or how did we do it in the food system, like from the composting on to producing more food and recovering food and producing biogas. So it's really about telling the whole story, and this has really inspired us, I think, and given us food for thought, and I will be in contact with you guys, so be prepared for that. Thank you.
And with this, we'll disconnect. So thank you, everybody, and stay healthy. And until the next Urban Transition Alliance webinar.